top 5 must-have AP automation features. So the first one is around data entry. The main feature you want to look for from an AP automation provider when you're speaking to them is how they extract information off incoming documents. And how does that process work? So if you think about an invoice coming into a mailbox, the invoice gets printed potentially, or it gets opened up, and your team are manually typing that information into the finance system. What we want to try and do is replace that manual data entry with the extraction software. But really we want to be honing in on how do the providers extract key information off the document, and how does that work on an ongoing basis? So every time you start working with a new supplier, or the layout changes, or you grow and you start to get new suppliers every day or every week or every month. The second piece I would say is a business rule checker, how we address business rules. Okay, so as part of the setup and configuration with the Kefron AP system, your implementation team from our business will talk to you about what some of the business rules you want to try and enforce are. So some of the common business rules we would try and enforce are, if an invoice comes in and it's supposed to reference a PO number, and we as a business operator know PO, no payment policy, but we're going to want to stop that. We're going to want to present it in the finance function and communicate to those suppliers. Maybe it's based on duplicates. Maybe you need us to extract bank details off your invoices and then validate those bank details against information we've got stored in your finance system. That's a really key and common one that we see more and more, particularly as a result of COVID, more people working from home. Unfortunately, the cases of potential fraud have continued to increase. And I think that business rule checker, you want to just check with any of the providers that you speak with about how advanced that is. So what are some of the business rules that are important to you as a business that you'd want to try and implement from day one, which again is going to give you more time back to the business and into the finance team to focus on other areas, but also it's going to give you that peace of mind when you go home at the end of the day that you haven't been a victim of fraud. Next piece is around automated coding and approval. So for non-purchase order invoice processes, unfortunately, because there's no purchase order related to the invoice, there's always going to be some form of manual intervention that probably has to occur. When you think about the coding piece, if your team were manually coding invoices and they're splitting across against multiple GLs, maybe they're filling across multiple departments, what we would want to try and do is automate that process as much as possible. So if we receive recurring bills every single month, and maybe you're a hyper growth business, so if you're using NetSuite or you're using Xero, and you receive recurring bills every month and they're coded the same way every time, unfortunately, someone in your business is probably coding those invoices every single time the same way. In the Kefron system, what we're going to try and do is automate that process. So we default the coding. So if an invoice comes in from company ABC, the system knows company ABC is always coded this way. The system will code it for your team, and then it's going to automatically route for approval. So your approvers in the organization are going to get notified every time they have an invoice to be approved. They're also going to get notified if they haven't approved their invoices within a specific period of time. So the system is going to, as we say, be the bad guy in the business, as opposed to the finance team or the accounts payable team constantly chasing management for approval. The system is going to continue to remind those approvers. Now, if you're splitting the cost across multiple GL codes and multiple departments, again, we would want to try and look at that and apply some sort of logic to automate that coding process, which immediately is time back to that finance person to focus on other activities. Touch-free three-way matching. So this is a really important one. If you're thinking about AP automation and you issue purchase orders now, right, today, you're issuing purchase orders in your finance system, maybe you're receiving goods. What we want to try and do is automate the matching of those POs against invoices against receipt notes. So some businesses we speak to have a two-way match. So if they're just issuing purchase orders for services, let's say for recruitment services, for example, when that invoice comes in, we're going to automatically match against the purchase order and the receipt note that we're pulling from your ERP or finance system. So if that happens, the invoice comes in for €1,000, it matches against the PO for €1,000, and it's been receipted for €1,000. Nobody needs to do anything from a processing point of view. The system is going to match those documents on your behalf and post the data ready for payment into your finance system. And that's really key in terms of how different providers do that and how easy it is to resolve the issues when there is queries. So that nicely leads on to the last point, the communication tools. So I always say the best benefit you'll get from this system is twofold. Number one is the automation and how we can automate the approval workflows, the coding, the purchase order matching and the three-way matching, the search and retrieval functionality. But then really it's about when things don't go automated. So when the invoice comes in and it has to stop because there's an issue or a query or a dispute, how are we going to make sure that we resolve that issue as quickly and as efficiently as possible?